Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this month's SLC Connect webinar. Just to introduce myself, my name is Matt, and I'm Account Director at SLC. Just a couple of housekeeping tips. The call will run for about 45 minutes. I am sharing my screen with you now, but once the presentation begins, I will switch off my camera just to remove that distraction. The presentation will run for 45 minutes, but if you have colleagues or people you work with who are not able to join, but you want them to watch it, we will also post a recording to our YouTube and our Facebook channel probably by tomorrow, I would say. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my presentation with you. Okay, sorry, excuse me. Okay, so what we wanted to do for you was bring together some of the data that has come out over the past couple of months in terms of identifying travel trends across the UK industry, what that means for this year and going forward as we move into this recovery period from COVID. So what I was going to start with quickly is a quick snapshot of where the UK is today, because I'm conscious that everyone attending is not necessarily based here in the UK. So in terms of how the UK is currently faring, I think it's pretty well established that the UK handled COVID pretty terribly throughout all of last year. But what has gone well is the vaccine rollout. And you can see here, this red line shows the number of vaccinations we are currently up to. So we are currently up to just over 18 million people have received at least their first dose. These blue numbers, these blue lines here are the daily vaccinations. So for example, you can see on the 30th of January, just shy of 600,000 people were vaccinated. And that number of vaccinations has dropped down over the past couple of weeks, but still we are ahead of track. Priority groups have now been vaccinated, at least with that first shot, and they are now moving into the over 60s. And I believe we are tracking to have vaccinated everyone come late May/June. So you can see down here, this is a chart just showing vaccinations by population. Top, of course, is, top, of course, is Israel, who have vaccinated 85% of the population. That's followed by the Seychelles and UAE. But in terms of a country with any sizable landmass or population, you can see that the leader there is the UK, who's on 28%. You have US on 19%. And in terms of any other sort of European countries, you have Denmark on just under 9% and Switzerland on 8%. Across the EU, the rough number of vaccinations is around 6% currently. So it's significantly lower, and there are hopes and beliefs that will speed up to open up intra-European travel, essentially. But obviously the fact that nearly 30% of the population has now been vaccinated is giving a boost in confidence to tourism. So on Monday, the UK government outlined its dates out of lockdown, which broke out into 5 key stages. The most significant date from a UK point of view for travel is May the 17th, where that has been earmarked as the date when international travel could potentially begin again. A date of a month before that, April 17th, there will be some form of white paper announcing what those, how travel essentially will work. But that date of May the 17th has been met really positively. And in fact, this whole roadmap in general has been viewed as really positively. Many industry leaders have criticized it as too slow, but others have also said that it's best to be cautious so that we don't end up in a third lockdown. And people, particularly in tourism, have actually appreciates it, purely because it gives them dates to work with, purely because there was a big campaign over the past couple of weeks called Save Our Summer, where a lot, not all, I should say, and there has been some controversy about it, but a lot of industry leaders came together to ask for a return to travel from May onwards. So the news cuttings from 24 hours after that date of May the 17th was shared, some of them can be seen here. So, for example, we have The Guardian saying holiday bookings surge, as does the BBC. The Independent and The Telegraph both lead with a rise in bookings by 600%. And the Times identifies Spain and Greece as the destinations topping the list of requests. In terms of what that has done for demand, Easyjet reported that bookings were up 337% week on week. Package holidays were up 630%, and the key months for travel were number one, August, followed by July, and then third was September. And their key destinations, very sort of typical EasyJet destinations: Malaga, Alicante, Palma, Faro, Crete. TUI reported that bookings were up 500% week on week, and their top selling destinations were Greece, Spain, and Turkey. And Thomas Cook, the revamped, relaunched Thomas Cook, announced that website traffic, once that announcement was made on Monday, was up 75%. Bookings tripled from the day before. And again, they led with short haul destinations: Turkey, Greece, and Cyprus. But additionally, Thomas Cook identified long-haul destinations selling well that were Dominican Republic and Mexico. And this is another trend that will continue, that started off in 2020, and it will continue into 21 and potentially even into 22/23, where we will have these air corridors, which we will come back to and talk about in a little bit, that are just generating huge pent-up demand. So you can see this chart was from late last year, and it came from Skyscanner, and this was based on demand for the Canary Islands, where you can see here in January there was strong peak trading at just over 13%. It then drops off a cliff down to a low of minus 75% during that initial outbreak of the pandemic. But then here we have in May that UK air corridor was announced between the UK and Spain, and you can see bookings here get up to, by July, just shy of minus 13%, not far off flat year on year, which is pretty significant considering that we were, deep in the midst of a pandemic still. So you can see that the minute you have these air corridors announced, you get these huge spikes in bookings, and equally when those air corridors are removed, the demand, of course, drops off again. Skyscanner reported that there was a 2,000% increase in searches for the Canary Islands when it was put onto that travel corridor. So again, travel corridors will continue, but in a different format in 2021, and we'll come back to those in a little bit. Flight Centre have announced their most popular searched destinations for travel in 2021. And really interestingly, and this, bear in mind that this data comes from their global website, so it's not specific just to the UK, but really interestingly, you still have Australia as heavily featured in their top 10. You have Brisbane at number 1, Sydney at 2, Melbourne at 6, and Perth as 7. Other interesting ones we have on that list are Cape Town. We also have Dubai, and you can see there is a big Caribbean focus. So we have Barbados at number 9, we have Antigua at 11, we have Jamaica at 13, and of course we have Bangkok just in there at number 14 as well. And one of the things that Flight Centre believe that will continue into 21 and probably into 22 is this dichotomy between bookings that will be super last minute. So e.g. where these travel corridors are announced, then you will see these huge spikes in last minute bookings to, for example, Dubai or wherever it might be. But then you will also have people booking much, much further out, probably big destinations such as Australia, where already Flight Centre are reporting people are looking to book well into 22, even the end of 22. They've even had requests coming in for 23. In terms of those destinations and who the winners and the losers from Flight Centre's point of view, the biggest growth numbers are the Maldives at number 4, Cape Town at 5, and Dubai at number 8. And you only have to look at any marketing over the past 3, 4, 5 months to see how heavily focused the likes of Dubai and the Maldives, and to a lesser degree the Indian Ocean, have been over the most recent months. They have been real far and away winners that have taken up a lot of the airtime that Australia, Thailand, Bali would previously have had. And the likelihood is that will continue until, I would say, at least the UK summer. You can see another big winner is the Caribbean, as we just mentioned, where you've got Barbados, Antigua, Jamaica all making entries. And then, of course, really the loser from a Flight Centre point of view is the USA, where you have New York, which has dropped from number 3 down to number 10. You've got Orlando dropping out of the top 10 to number 15, and you've got Vegas down to 16. So TRAVELZOO are reporting Maldives bookings as being up not bookings, I should say, searches as being up 79% year on year. Their top searched destinations have been Dubai, the Caribbean, Greece, Italy, and New York, surprisingly. And in terms of travel trends, we will come back to this in a little bit. But you can see here you've got 44% of people looking for trips 8 to 14 days and 15% looking for 15 plus days. So you essentially have just shy of 60% of people looking for trips over 8 days plus, whereas in the past, TRAVELZOO were reporting, the biggest number would be 7 days. TRAVELZOO also surprisingly are reporting cruise searches remaining strong, although they do hasten to add those cruise searches by and large are limited to Europe. People aren't interested currently in Caribbean, they're not interested in transatlantic. People are staying closer to home, so they still want that cruise option, but they want a closer to home version. And the top months for TRAVELZOO searches currently are September, June, and May. Skyscanner put together a report towards the end of January, the 21st of January it was. And at the time that they reported that, they were reporting that volumes from the UK were up 12%, and there was a 7% growth in bookings over the past week, with July being the most popular month. Portugal bookings had gone up by 2,000% when that air corridor was announced in Q4, which again goes back to our point around this huge amount of pent-up demand, where the minute somewhere is announced as a possible destination for the UK, people will book. So the market is very much being led by where people can go to at the moment. The actual destination is less important than the opportunity for people to travel. And in terms of sentiment, Skyscanner polled 1,000 UK travellers, and 30% said they were planning to spend more money on their trip than they would have done pre-pandemic. And we believe that this is a trend that will continue and that will grow throughout 21, where people have pent up monies and people haven't travelled, and people think rather than doing the normal sort of 2 weeks in the summer, actually we're going to do 3 weeks, or we might normally stay in a fairly cheap hotel, but actually we think it's safer and we want to have a bit more luxury, so we're going to splash out on a private villa. And again, surprisingly, actually, 64% of people polled by Skyscanner were looking for a long haul trip, which is not typically the sentiment that we are used to seeing. We are used to being told that demand will be initially in the short term, short haul. and there were 56% of people who were carrying over annual leave from 2020, and 68% of them had at least 7 days to use. So again, in terms of how that will affect our travel trends throughout the year and ahead, you can see people have more annual leave to play with, again, which may play into either more holidays down the line, either this year or again into next year, because you can still carry over that leave into next year, and people still may be, in some cases, slightly conservative about traveling too much this year. Or people will go this year, but they will go for longer. They will spend longer. They won't travel around so much. They will get one key destination and they will spend longer in destination. Skyscanner announced their key destinations in terms of searches for 2021 summer. In terms of short haul, they are a lot of the usual ones. You have Faro, you have Malaga, Palma, Alicante, Crete and Tenerife. Mid-haul, Dalaman, Dubai and Islamabad. And long haul, just getting in there, we have one US destination, Orlando. Going back to data that Flight Centre have researched, one thing that has surprised them is that they thought that the first market initially to bounce back would be the youth market, but actually just from a practical point of view, the one that is coming back faster is the 50+ market. And there's a couple of reasons behind that. A couple of reasons are, for example, the youth market, a lot of those people are the people who have been furloughed, who have lost their jobs, who are, now in less financially stable positions than the 50+ market, who in many cases no longer have mortgages, who are more secure, plus the fact that the over 50 market also are the people who are being vaccinated as priority and who are starting to look at travel again. So Flight Centre are very much interested in investing in the youth market further into the year, but not immediately. But that is another trend we will see a big focus on as the year progresses, where you have the likes of Flight Centre and the likes of Trailfinders who will both be targeting the youth market, particularly off the back of the demise of STA Travel in 2020. Trailfinders had already announced in 2020, pre-STA Travel going down, that they were looking to start to move into the youth market. Flight Centre sort of plays with the youth market a little bit in the US, but both of those companies will be looking to harness the demand from these youth customers. Flight Centre are also reporting really strong demand in what they call their specialist market. So they are reporting big business for first and business class. And a lot of the demand for that, again, another trend that will continue throughout the year, is driven by people thinking, I'm going to have a bit more luxury. I've got all this, all this pent up money, or people thinking, whether that's right or wrong, thinking, if I travel in business, at least it's in my head, it's less opportunity to contract COVID, less people, less cramped, more relaxing. Flight Centre are also reporting good group bookings from Q4 onwards, and long haul demand is coming back for them for Q4 onwards. An interesting thing here, and this may well continue to develop as a travel trend throughout 21, is a dichotomy between supply and demand. And a really good example of this is Australia. And this is less of an air issue, because obviously there are restrictions around air, but more of a land issue, where you have customers looking to make bookings for Australia well into 22. But you have a lot of Australian suppliers right now who are saying, we're not focused on the international market right now. We don't think they want to book right now. We're focused only on the domestic market. We are potentially cancelling out international bookings to free up space for the domestic market, and we don't want to commit to pricing for 22 yet. Whereas you have a lot of UK operators saying to the Australian market, but we do have customers, we have people who want to book. And I think, that as a travel trend is an interesting thing, where you have a cultural clash. You have the Australians who are very, borders are closed, borders have been closed for a long time, they're not going to open for a long time. And there's a lot of cultural work to do in Australia about persuading people that it is a good idea to open up again, and to accept that they will have to live with certain numbers of COVID once international travel starts again. Whereas the UK is so used to those COVID numbers that it's less of a concern, especially once people are vaccinated and who are wanting to travel, and who are very, very, probably overly optimistic in some cases about the minute they read good news, they want to book. So in terms of focusing on Flight Centre for a couple of minutes, because this again will translate into future travel trends across the industry. One key thing to pick out here is the downsizing of the high street, which will realistically continue across all operators. And particularly another really good example of this is Kuoni. So in Flight Centre's case, they had over 100 high street stores at one point. But talking to Flight Centre, that business model, they admitted, was unsustainable by the end. You had not enough footfall really to service those 100 high street stores, and often demand in those stores was being complemented by online bookings. So they were having to be fed through to translate into enough bookings for the high street. So COVID has not signaled the death knell for the high street, but it has certainly accelerated the need for the high street to reinvent. So for example, in Flight Centre's case, they have downsized to 11 stores, which are London and Southeast based, plus one in Bristol. And they have moved essentially to a virtual model, where the stores that have closed, they have retained the store managers, they've retained the assistant managers, and in many cases they've retained any senior sales staff, and they have been kept on as full-time virtual home workers. And they will be picking up virtual bookings via Zoom. And they are talking about practicalities to roll out, for example, home visits, to run pop-up events for local markets, to potentially meet customers in cafes. And this virtual model essentially is the leading model of the future, where the high street will be reinvented as a key flagship destination to go to experience, to try and experience the product, to have that product brought to life for you. But the key leader will be the virtual assistant and sales agent. And Kuoni, for example, came out with that model really, really early on, and have reported that virtual bookings have been hugely successful for them. And one thing that Kuoni picked up on was actually, for a lot of their bookings, and this again is a trend that is coming up this year, a lot of their bookings are multi-generational in families. So it might be grandparents, parents and kids, and actually doing a video call is a really seamless way to bring together all of those key stakeholders together, rather than one person coming in and then relaying all the information to the grandparents, speaking to the kids. Everyone can jump on the call, everyone can answer those calls, ask those questions, sorry. And it's also a brilliant way to increase attachment by having all those customers present. And then Flight Centre will continue to invest in really the what you would call the travel counsellors business model, of working with associates who essentially work for themselves, who have their own databases, who have a database of generally quite high net worth customers and lucrative local markets that they're really well embedded in. And those associates simply want to leverage Flight Centre's systems and product. In terms of sentiment, Flight Centre polled 7,000 customers throughout 2020, and you can see that in July, up here, 63% of people were feeling nervous about travel. That had risen to 73% by September, when all those travel corridors were removed. But actually by December, sentiment was rising again. So there were only 32% of people who were nervous or worried about travel by then. And in terms of polling those 7,000 people further, 51% were feeling hopeful about future travel. 95% were willing to take a COVID test to be able to travel. And 70% of customers said that the news of the vaccine rollout gave them confidence that they would be able to travel and that they would book a holiday. A really big trend for 21, and probably, the genie is now out of the bottle, so it's unlikely that in any time soon we will go backwards, is flexibility. So you can see all of these operators are leading with book with us. We have flexible programs for you. Cancel free of charge, low deposits. In fact, Hayes Travel sent out an email yesterday to their database saying that essentially the £0 deposit is coming soon, and more information to follow. Flight Centre have done a big campaign over the past month on why their what they call flex is the best. So everyone is leading with book with us, get some kind of deposit down, and we can change if there are any problems with your booking. And that is something that when product managers are renegotiating contracts with key partners, that is a huge thing for them. It's, can we roll over pricing for next year? But it's also, we need those bookings to be flexible. So that is a huge trend that has been hastened by COVID, where that flexibility will not go away now. People expect it and need it. In terms of aviation trends, a controversial one, but one that seems very likely to become a reality soon, is no jab, no fly. So, for example, Flight Centre's CEO, Graham Screw Turner, said the obvious way to make sure travellers don't spread COVID around a lot would be to have a vaccination requirement. And at the weekend in the Sunday Times, they interviewed in the travel section Trailfinders founder and chairman Mike Gooley. When he was asked about that, he said he was very clear that it is not a vaccination passport. He said it's an immunization certificate, and it's key to unlocking our freedoms generally, not just for travel. Everyone will have the option of a jab soon, so any question of discrimination is fast reducing, which, it doesn't cover off all bases, because obviously there are some reasons some people cannot be vaccinated, but he very much feels that it is essential. So it seems increasingly likely that many airlines will adopt this policy. And the thing from an international point of view that will be really important will be that there is an international standard that is recognized wherever you travel. The likelihood seems to be that it will be a digital app form of passport or a certificate that you will show when you enter a country. But this is a trend that will not go away. Another trend which is less positive for some of us is the likelihood of airline prices. And going back to these key operators, Mike Gooley says when we return to normal, there's going to be a desperate shortage of aircraft seats because of pent-up demand, and also because so many staff and aircraft were stood down during the past 12 months, that actually there just isn't the resource to service the amount of demand that there will be as it bounces back. So airlines will put up prices, and both Flight Centre and Trailfinders are really, really key in saying book now, get your 21 prices locked in even for 22, but those deals will not be around forever. Book now. Trailfinders are reporting that they are booking as late as Q4 22 for some customers. And again, those customers are being locked in at 2021 prices and on 2021 deals. Another key trend that is coming out of aviation is private jet usage, which has exponentially risen over the past year. You can see here that wired.co.uk, they wrote a whole article about how the pandemic has created a middle-class private jet boom. Now, obviously, private jets are still way out of reach of many of us, but there is, once just the preserve of the super wealthy, there is a growing number of sort of top earner middle class people who are now considering using private jets. So they interviewed one person who had spent, for example, 10 grand on a flight to get his family from Malaga back to Liverpool over the summer, just him and his family. A couple of other things around that is, famously, the pandemic has made the poor poorer and the rich richer. So the rich have more money to spend. And you also have these people in the higher middle income bracket who potentially haven't traveled anywhere for 12 months and are thinking, actually, if I book with EasyJet or Ryanair, for example, like I normally do, who knows, maybe that'll get cancelled. Also, the flight will be rammed, it might not be that safe. I've saved up all this additional money over the past 12 months. Let's do a luxury splurge and do a private jet to get us on our summer holiday. When private jet bookings started to rise in 2020, it was generally for people getting home, essentially repatriation. But actually, that continued into the summer with people using them for summer getaways. And talking to some of those luxury operators now, they report that actually people are continuing to book private jets in many cases right now and over the past couple of months, really to circumnavigate government rules. So to get to destinations really that they're not officially supposed to be traveling to, and to cut out some of that red tape as well. The article in Wired also argued that people are using private jets essentially to try and create travel bubbles for themselves. So to limit contact with other people, to make it as seamless as possible. Private jet to a private airport, get in a car, go to your villa and not have any contact with anybody else, essentially. Adam Twiddell, who is the CEO of JetBooker Private Fly, announced that they had seen more families traveling than ever before. So over the summer, 20% of their customers were children. They also coined a phrase, the pet set, where they said they were also including in these family bookings cats, dogs, and in one case even a snake. They reported bookings being up year on year. The Swiss charter company Lunajets reported that demand had tripled, and they were reporting that September to December, their private jet bookings are typically only ever corporate, but actually the corporate had, of course, disappeared because no one is traveling for business, but it had been more than replaced by families continuing to travel over this time. And whereas in the past, some of these high net worth customers actually had been quite democratic about the way they booked. Had in the summer, they had traveled on BA or even EasyJet, for example. But actually, because those routes had been removed by those operators, they were using private for both the winter route, which they would always do because the route was maybe not serviced as much, but then they were also booking it for the summer routes. So going back to the notion of travel bubbles, a normal commercial flight, according to this research, contains 700 points of contact from check-in through to arrival, where, you know, potentially you could contract COVID. Whereas with a private jet, if you charter that, it can be as little as 20 forms of contact. And Megan Wolf, who is the CEO of FlexJet, believes that the experience from the past year has changed people's thinking about private aviation, where it's not just a luxury, a completely, you know, 1% luxury product. Actually, people are seeing it as more accessible. People are thinking about traveling with their parents, for example, slash grandparents, and are thinking, how can we get them there safely? How can we make it as seamless as possible? How can we make it as stress-free as possible? Skift, who do a lot of travel research, identified their own trends coming up across the year and throughout. And they believe that airlines will become more conservative and humble. And by that, they mean that, that, for example, some of these, what they coin brash new ventures, will become a thing of the past. So, for example, Norwegian, a couple of years ago, there was huge fanfare from them about, we're moving into the long haul market. We've got our New York route. We're going to fly everywhere eventually. And then, of course, in the past week, they have announced that they are pulling all long haul and focusing on their key European short haul routes. What we will find as well, as these airlines become more conservative, are that there are many routes now that will no longer be served. So you'll have millions of customers globally who will find it less convenient to get to where they want to go, who are used to having a flight that goes to their smaller, more regional airport, and they're finding that airlines will concentrate on their key hubs, will concentrate on the key routes that drive volume and revenue, and will drop more and more routes. So people will find that it's harder for them to get where they want to go. They might have to change at least once, maybe twice. They might have to do some land travel for some substantial amount of time once they get to the country they want to go to. So travel will not be as widespread as it has been as the airlines hunker down. Also, business travel, of course, will recover, but probably not to the levels it was before. There will always be a need for business travel, but some of that need has, of course, been removed by the growth of video conferencing through Zoom, through Teams, whichever it is. And there is always a need to visit in market. There's always a need to have that connection, but some of those trips will be removed. And of course, companies also may be conservative about sending customers abroad, you know, because they may be opening themselves up to being sued, for example, if those staff contract COVID. They may not want to pay out insurance premiums to cover staff in case they contract COVID, and staff also may be reluctant. Plus, companies will not have the revenue that they once had to be able to invest necessarily in business travel. So what you then may find is that airlines who typically have made their money from the front end of the plane need to make more money from the back end of the plane. So again, prices will rise for everyone. Influencer Intelligence put together reports on social media and how that will filter out into influencer marketing. And one of the key trends that will only rise is the use of social media influencers, particularly in travel, where to date it's still a relatively untapped market, and it's probably been mainly tapped by retail, fashion, for example, but it will grow increasingly throughout travel. Some of the key trends that Influencer Intelligence have picked up on is these new platforms such as TikTok, such as Triller, such as Twitch. TikTok has been the real winner of them. And they believe that you will see these marketing campaigns in travel diversifying further, where at the moment you have print, you have online, you have Instagram, you have Facebook. In some cases they use Twitter, but that will diversify further across particularly TikTok, where you have that level of interaction and participation. There was also a huge rise in 2020 of global content produced by regional influencers, so people based in destination, and that will continue to have a huge impact on travel marketing going forward, where it's cheaper because that person's already there, it's more authentic because they literally can film handheld iPhone. So obviously there is always a need for that professional, slick approach to marketing. But actually, what marketing companies, marketing departments in travel will leverage further as we progress is that sort of identifying that youth customer and that millennial / Gen Z customer by tapping into them with this authentic content as well. Excuse me. 70% of Generation Z consumers use social media as their primary source of news. So that just goes to show that, again, for this youth customer who travel leaders are increasingly wanting to tap into, that will need to be their key entry in with that person. And going back to TikTok, those campaigns where need to be around shareability and participation, and that we will see more and more and more of, where you will engage with your customer base in travel by asking them to participate and to share it out to their own networks themselves. And one thing that has yet to be trialed and rolled out for travel really is shoppable content across social media. It's already quite well established from a fashion point of view, but actually shoppable content on social media is the fastest growing ad stream to be able to reach digital consumers, and really it's a very untapped market at the moment for travel. In terms of further customer trends, we will see, as 2021 progresses and through to 22, the Generation Z exodus, where we have people desperate to travel and who are less concerned about the health risks, the travel restrictions. As I mentioned already, Trailfinders are already investing heavily in targeting the youth market later on this year. And you have, all these people under 30 who for the past year have been furloughed. Maybe they've been stuck in a really small flat in London. Maybe they've had to move back to their parents. Whatever it is, they have a burning need to travel. You also have those people, and it says here the bucket list trip. And we always think of bucket lists for people, seniors, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s and onwards. But you have youth travelers who for years, for example, have been thinking, I'm going to do Australia and do my working holiday maker before I'm 25, for example, and people have put it off. And now they think, I need to do it as soon as possible. You also have what we've termed there the 2008 wanderer, where post credit crunch last time, we had huge numbers of people who had been made redundant, who had decent redundancy packages, who actually think, what, the economy, there's no jobs around at the moment, or there's huge competition for jobs. I'm just doing a sort of really casual job that isn't my career, and I've got this redundancy money sitting there. I'm going to go traveling for a year, and hopefully by the time I come back, things will be much better. Going back again to talking about longer trips, Flight Centre reported that they had 70% of customers looking for trips of 14 plus nights, but only 3% of people looking for weekend breaks. So at least in the short term, the city break, the weekend break is gone. Very much in the short term. It will come back But people are not focused on cities right now. People are focused on sun, relaxation, lying by a pool, escaping from the norms of real life. And that will continue well throughout this year. And we've already touched on it, but that multi-generational travel will also continue as a huge theme for this year, with several members of a family getting together to celebrate after potentially a year of not seeing each other. Which recently did a report actually where they revealed that that they identified for their base booking with an agent, rather than booking those components all individually, actually works out cheaper, and it also provides additional safety and flexibility, and that packages offer much greater protection if your trip has been affected. And obviously the whole refunds for Argo that came around when COVID first hit burned a lot of people, but the industry, as from a travel agent point of view, has managed to sort of recoup a lot of that goodwill. And the likelihood is, in the short term, in terms of travel trends, people will move away from booking online with OTAs to wanting to book with a travel agent, where they can ask advice, where they know who to go to if there are problems, where they know who to go to if they need to change that booking. Now, the OTA is not going to go away. The OTA will come back with a bang. People will always have that desire for cheap online, book myself whilst I'm watching TV. But in the short term, the travel agent has really reclaimed their spot. And that's why I say, there is a big opportunity here for the high street travel agent to be reinvented. The high street travel agent is not dead and gone. There is a need to have these key flagship stores where people can go in, where people know that person, where people can ask those questions, where they can go back as many times as they need to. But that experience has to be reinvented for a digital market. Travel Weekly were reporting that some consortia had noticed significant increases in traffic to their websites that house travel advisor profiles. So Virtuoso said that consumer inquiries had doubled from June to September, and that January saw a 50% increase over December in requests to connect with an advisor. So again, there is a more evidence there of the travel agent really reclaiming their spot as your go-to to book your travel. Skift also reported that in terms of consumer trends, that travel will recover, it will grow significantly again. So you can see on this chart, for example, here you have SARS, you have bird flu, but you can see here that travel numbers just continue to grow. Now you can see here, this is obviously 2019 and 2020 when travel falls off a cliff. But that desire to stay local, to stay domestic, is a temporary thing, and it will become a trend in itself, in that we will continue that. People have reappraised their home countries, have reappraised the fact that you don't need to travel to the other side of the world all the time, or that you don't need to travel as far. But the desire to travel will not go away. It is a huge trend, and people will weather this storm and come out the other side of it. So there will also be, according to Skift, a new consciousness about the way we travel. Now, this isn't really a new thing. We've been talking about this for a number of years now, but that, you have a whole generation of people coming up who are already here, who in a few years' time are going to start hitting their 40s and are, have more disposable income that they've ever had before, where socially conscious travel is more and more and more important. So Booking.com surveyed people in 2020, and 60% said they would use an app or website that recommended itineraries where tours would have a positive impact on locals. So a good example of that is, for example, Adventures, where they run programs with local guides. And in this Booking.com global survey, 51% claimed they would change their chosen travel destination and head to a less popular one if they knew that that would have less of an adverse environmental impact. This chart here just shows how important environmental responsibility is for millennial and Generation Z travelers. So you have the US and the UK and Australia here. The dark blue line is it is important for me to choose travel businesses that prioritize environmentally sustainable programs, which is 59% in the US, 59% in the UK, and 60% in Australia. And then roughly 50% across all three is I'm willing to pay higher fares to use an environmentally conscious travel service provider. But in China and India, where you obviously have huge young markets all looking to travel, those numbers are high. You've got 90% and 81% saying it is important to choose businesses that prioritize environmentally sustainable programs, and 78/76% willing to pay more. So in terms of travel trends, Skift have also identified what they call the splintered effect, where travel will recover, but in different ways, if you like. So for example, this will be different for different countries, depending on if your borders are open, depending on if your population has been vaccinated, depending on how welcome travelers feel to go to that destination, if that destination feels like it doesn't want you to be there because of COVID. Also, we've already mentioned, but there will be this two-way lane where people are focusing more on domestic travel and combining it with international. International will not go away, of course, at all, but people will mix and match. They will do a week, if they're in the UK, they might do a week in Cornwall, and then they might do 2 weeks in Italy, for example. There will be a need for holidays to be as practical as possible for people. So by that, people want it to be as straightforward as possible. They want to know that they will be safe. They want to know that it will be seamless. And these concepts of outdoors travel, of restorative travel, of wellness travel, which have already grown exponentially over the past couple of years, will continue to grow further. And long haul hasn't gone away by any means, but at least in the short term, shorter trips are the focus. One interesting market that really has yet to be sort of harnessed and sort of really marketed to is the affluent Black customer market, where travel, in many cases, it can be argued at being targeted predominantly at a white market, and you have a wealthy Black customer who it maybe feels they are not being catered to at the moment, and you have these growing demographics of customers. And China is a really good example from the past 10 years, where operators have started to think the Chinese market is coming into destination. How do we need to attract them, and what do we need to do to attract them? Just focusing on a few luxury trends that are coming up. Globe Trender identified their key trends for 2021. One is private buyouts, where private buyouts in the luxury market is not a new thing by any means, but that is growing increasingly as well, where customers in that bracket, in that 1%, are demanding it more, and islands, hotels, properties are basically considering it more. You have, in the same way that private jets are increasing in usage, heli hopping, where people are chartering, buying, whatever it is, helicopters to actually get them from point to point, again, with less forms of contact. And you also have, and we've seen a lot of instances of this in the past year, people essentially recreating their home in a holiday destination. So people saying, I'm going to go to the Caribbean for 6 months, I'm going to base myself there, I'm going to work from there, and I'll come back to the UK once this is all calmed down. You have that in the Caribbean, you have it in the Indian Ocean, and that will continue realistically throughout this year. And there is an argument that that may well permeate into not just the luxury market, where you have people who are saying, I no longer work in an office, I don't need to be there, you know, I could be in South Africa, for example, the time difference is minimal, I could work UK hours, and I could be based in Cape Town, for example. And then you also have, in the same way that we've talked about bucket lists, you have these ultra itineraries being produced for the luxury market, where again people have put off those trips, but they want to make up for those lost trips and really blow the budget with really luxury itineraries. So we're sort of coming to the end of our time, and I appreciate we've done a real whistle stop summary of some of the key trends that are shaping the UK industry for the year ahead and really through to the next few years. But just to conclude with a few of those, there is huge pent-up demand. Now, the bounce back with that demand will be uneven. And a lot of that relates to, for example, these air corridors, where these air corridors in 2020 were based on where the government announced you could go. Air corridors in 2021 and beyond will be based on immunization / vaccination, whichever you want to call it. So, for example, good example of that that's coming up right now is that just this week, or last week rather, Greece, Cyprus and Israel have announced vaccination corridors between them for travelers who are vaccinated. And Greece this week has been in talks with the UK about launching similar from the summer onwards. That will become a thing. So those corridors will be established, but you know, there are many questions around those still. Will Europe want, for example, want Brits going in if COVID numbers are still there? Or will the UK government want us to go into, for example, Italy, if only, let's say, 25% of the population have been vaccinated? Or will it not matter as long as they say you can only travel if you're vaccinated, for example? The likelihood is that that will be how air corridors will work from now on. And the likelihood, again, is if there are outbreaks of COVID in destinations, if we get further waves of COVID, that you may well find those corridors get removed at relatively short notice. For now, consumers hold all the cards, really. So operators are being directed to stock product just based on what people will book. So, for example, that pivot to the Caribbean, that pivot to Maldives, that pivot to Dubai, people are booking and operators are having to keep up with that demand. And customers booking right now are getting amazing deals, but that is for now. Those prices will rise. Private travel, so jets, helicopters, whatever it is, will continue to grow, will continue to become more accessible for a certain level of consumer. And right now, your traditional travel agent has the upper hand. So OTAs are out of favor, but that will not last. OTAs will bounce back because there will always be a space for cheap. There will always be a space for that customer sitting on the sofa comparing prices across Skyscanner, for example, and Kayak, whatever it is. And the high street is not dead at all, but COVID has accelerated it having to change, it having to adapt, it having to think about why people should be there. Should it be that towns and city centres are reinvented as a more residential space with, and this has already happened in many places already, where you now have a lot of shops that have disappeared and have been replaced by restaurants and cafes and coffee shops. And then you need these key, these really interesting retail spaces for people to go in and give them a reason to be there. Virtual consultations have boomed and will increase further, and also increase opportunities for operators to attach land product in particular. And sustainable travel, which we've just talked about, will further boom, with people more than ever being conscious of their carbon footprint and conscious of not, for want of a better term, contaminating local cultures, the local lay of a land. Airline routes will become more limited. So some of those destinations that in the past couple of years, we've seen as up and coming destinations with more airlines starting to operate those routes, unfortunately, some of them may suffer, some of them may disappear, some of them may find that they now have to connect with low cost charters from the main hubs. So again, the key destinations that will drive the next couple of years are the big players, really. And trips, finally, are getting longer. People are looking at spending longer in place. People don't want to travel around. Touring is not a thing people are looking for right now. They want to go, they want to relax, they want to just forget about everything that has happened, and they want to spend longer in destination rather than trying to pack in as much as they possibly can do. So I am going to finish there. So I want to thank everyone for joining today's call. If you want a copy of the presentation, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to send you across a copy. If you want to see the video, the recording of this will be online in the next 24 hours, or if you can't find it, please just let me know. You can email me at matt@slcrepresentation.com, and anything else, any questions you have, anything you'd like to ask any further about, please just drop me a line and I'm more than happy to answer that for you. So in the meantime, I'd like to thank everyone for joining, and don't forget that our next SLC call that is coming up next week, it will be based in Queensland. We're going to go live to Australia, where we are going to go over to, excuse me, Tangalooma Island, and we are going to feed the dolphins live. So please do join us, and let me know if you need any help from us. But otherwise, have a great day, and thank you so much for joining today's call. Bye, everyone.